Hello, welcome to another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing really good.
Good.
Well, we got a special guest in the podcast room with us today, Mr. Andy Tower, Executive Director of Indiana or Public Policy for Indiana Farm Bureau Co-op. So welcome.
No, thank you for having us.
Yep. Well, before we get started, everyone is held to the same standard, and you have to have the question of the day.
And it's low. It is low. Yep. All right. You asking him?
You ask him. They'll give me time to think.
All right. Andy, your question of the day.
Guest has to go first.
Yeah, you have to go first. Which a lot of times that's a gift because you get the good questions. I'm not sure you got a good question, but all right. Dream dinner party guest, living or dead, and why?
It can't be a Sunday school answer.
Okay. So I think for me, my dream dinner guest would be my grandfather.
Yeah.
He worked for Producers Marketing, part of the old Farm Bureau Co-op system years ago as their feeder pig buyer for many years, retired 25 years of service there. But I think in a lot of ways, he's one of the ones that instilled the passion for agriculture for me. So he passed away back in '96 as I was graduating high school, and I'd love to sit down and talk to him about where agriculture has gone, and especially the pork industry, and how it's changed from when he was working, and just see what his thoughts are on the world today.
I'm not sure you want that.
Oh my gosh! Can you imagine?
Well, the great thing about him, he never. He was pretty outspoken. You never really had to wonder what he was really thinking.
Yeah.
He didn't pull any punches. So I think it'd be pretty honest and frank. And it may be maybe some things that some of us in the industry may not be ready to hear. May have seen some changes that definitely some great changes that happened in the industry, but maybe some things that we might want to go back and reflect on and maybe think, well, maybe we should see if we can shift this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd went into a coma 20 years ago and woke up today, and turned the TV on, you'd be
What? It's like what?
What
am I?
Yeah.
What horrible movie is it?
What time warp?
Exactly. So,
I tell you what, I'm going to take Andy's answer too. I think either one of my grandfathers. I was fortunate enough to have one grandfather until I was 18, but the other, my Italian grandfather, he passed away when I was younger, and still have good memories of him. But I'd sure like to know more. He was awful proud that of the United States, and whenever he immigrated directly from Italy. And never brought any of the old country with him. I mean, he never spoke Italian again, except whenever he was excited, and never taught any of the kids. And I remember in 1976, I can remember back that far, we had red, white, and blue ice cream, and it was Happy Birthday America, and it was a big deal. So, but yeah, I'd like to talk to him just to learn a little bit more about our history, because we really never brought any with us as a family. So that's mine.
well, I didn't know either one of my grandpas. I didn't have that answer, but both of my grandpas passed away the same year, 2 years prior to me being born. So I didn't know either one of them. But my grandmother was remarried, and I had a grandpa that stepped in, and I wouldn't have known any different had they not told me. So that was good. But I think I'd like to sit down and have a dinner with Abraham Lincoln. I really would like to.
That'd be cool.
That'd be real
Say, let's look at the things we're navigating through today. How would you do it? Because I don't know anybody who ever faced this. Several people who have faced very tough decisions, but man, his whole country was coming apart underneath him, and his navigational skills through all of that. And yeah, I'm sure that it wasn't pretty all the time when he made them, but he still made those decisions.
Or Alexander Hamilton. Pick one of those.
Pick one of those guys.
Oh my gosh.
Any of those.
And what did you
guys,
mean? Whenever you did this, did you ever expect we'd have this?
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that would be something. I'm not saying I'm smart enough to sit in the same room and even talk to him. I'd probably just let him go. Just start him loose and let him go. So,
well, it's interesting you say Lincoln, because every time I get a chance to go out to Washington, D.C., try to always make a point to go to Lincoln Memorial, and it's, every time, there's just an awe about that building and the words that are inscribed on the walls in there. And so, yeah, he is pretty interesting. It'd be amazing to see what he'd think of the instant media that we have today compared to how they operated back then.
absolutely. Yep, for sure.
You
Yeah,
think you probably think politics was easier than it was back then. It was pretty much it was pretty much fisticuffs almost back then, wasn't
well, he
it?
died for it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it just really did. I mean, what he did, doing what he thought was right. So one of many that's done it. So yeah, it's a good piece of our past for sure. So. All right, Andy, we're going to not talk about history anymore. We're going to let you talk about current and hopefully future things that are coming. So that's the hand you've been dealt. You don't get Lincoln's hand, you get yours. So.
Well, we can't cut it anyway now because now we're all laughing right after we was talking about Lincoln.
Right.
So
Right, exactly.
we come back and we're all got
here
tears
we
in our
are.
eyes.
Right. Well, and the polish on this thing, if it was too polished, they'd know. There's more on the cutting room floor than there is on YouTube. So what about the 2023 Farm Bill?
2023 Farm Bill. It's more and more looking like we're going to be potentially a 24 Farm Bill, maybe even beyond that. We've had a lot of meetings with the congressional delegation throughout the year, several meetings here this month of August as they've all been on recess. We're pretty far behind in the process. We were hoping we would have a draft text out of the House going into these August recess meetings. That's not happened. Now we're hearing potentially mid-September. But the other challenge in this whole Farm Bill conversation is just the appropriations process and keeping the government running. And so if you were following along there late in July, there was 12 appropriation bills that need to get passed so we could keep the government running beyond the end of September. Well, I think only one of those was passed. And so now when they come back to D.C. here next week, they've got 11 bills they got to get hammered out to even keep the government running, let alone start to find floor time to debate the Farm Bill. So, I think we're fortunate here in Indiana. We've got folks like Senator Braun and Congressman Baird that are on the Farm Bill committees for the respective chambers. But there's a lot of work to be done. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that we might be able to yet get a Farm Bill here late in 23. We're definitely going to need some extensions to get us past the current expiration date of September 30th. But we might be able to see something late 23, right before they come home for the Christmas holiday. But I think more and more likely we're going to be looking at potentially a one-year extension of the Farm Bill and to get us past the election cycle of 24, because that's the other challenge. Once we get into the election, the campaign season, they're not going to have a whole lot of time to really debate the Farm Bill. But I think we've got a few things working in our favor. You've got Senator Stabenow, one of the chair of the Senate Ag Committee. She's not rerunning, so she's been very, very good to the ag community. And so as part of her legacy, I don't think she wants to get out of Washington, D.C. without this Farm Bill being passed. So that's why we're hearing more and more part of the issue why we're hearing more and more conversations, maybe in that lame duck session post-24 election, that's when we get the Farm Bill actually passed. But there's a lot of work, and as you all know, your listeners know, Washington, D.C. is a crazy place. Anything can happen and may happen. So, but it's going to be a wild ride before we get there.
Not everybody, certainly the Farm Bill. When we say it like that, explain some of the span of items that are in this Farm Bill. Why it's so important to consumers and to farmers. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we call it the Farm Bill, but it's grown to the point where it's more of a nutrition bill.
Yeah.
This next Farm Bill will be the largest Farm Bill ever passed, somewhere around $1.5 trillion, and somewhere between 85% of that piece of legislation is going to be nutrition titles. So a lot of people think SNAP, so there's some other programs under there. But I think one of the things to remember, and this is where our members at Indiana Farm Bureau, we are supporting keeping the nutrition title and the farm programs together, because the other thing is our population continues to shift. We have more urban suburban legislators and not enough rural legislators. So if we split those two split the nutrition out and the ag programs out, we'll likely get a nutrition bill passed, but I don't know as if we ever get another Farm Bill passed. And so we need to keep those together. But I think the other thing about it, many of our members and your customers, we think about growing commodities, whether they be corn, soybeans, pigs, cows, but at the end of the day, they are food. And so I think, keeping that together, I mean, as you think about how it relates to national security, food security, it's important. So that nutrition title's a big piece of the bill. Then you have the commodity title, and that's where your crop insurance, some of those programs that a lot of our folks and your listeners are probably a little bit more familiar with. Conservation programs fall under there. And that, one of the things that in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was a lot of money thrown towards conservation programs. But, we're just trying to make sure in that space that they remain voluntary, incentive-based. As our President Crone often says, the carrot works much better than the stick. And the other thing is, as it relates to commodity or conservation and ultimately back to that commodity title, is not making, some of these climate practices mandatory for eligibility for crop insurance. And so making sure we continue to have those conversations. The rural development title is another big piece of the Farm Bill. And so this is where a lot of rural water co-ops, rural telephones, some of those critical infrastructure pieces. We're also seeing a lot of broadband dollars come through the rural development component. One of the things that is a new priority for Indiana Farm Bureau and American Farm Bureau this year through rural development is affordable childcare. One of the things we've heard from a lot of our members is just the challenge to find quality, affordable childcare in our rural communities. And so without that, one of the spouses has to stay home, take care of the kids, and so it starts to limit some income opportunities. So looking for some opportunities there. There's some other minor titles in the bill. There's a trade title. There's an energy title in there as well. I think overall there's 12 different titles that compose the Farm Bill. Wow. But the nutrition and then the commodity and conservation titles are the big ones for our members and a lot of your listeners, I'd have to assume.
You'd think there'd be a lot of commonality about food. You wouldn't think that would be hard to come around an agreement on.
So where are the biggest hangups? What will cause the biggest discussion?
So I think really the biggest,
is it amount?
The amount is absolutely probably going to be the biggest challenge. I mean, I think in principle, there's a lot of bipartisan support around the Farm Bill. But on the House side, you have the Freedom Caucus, the far right, that's uber conservative, doesn't want any more spending, limited government. And so even some Republicans are talking about how do we even cut crop insurance programs? How do we reduce some of the other conservation type programs? But a lot of focus on crop insurance from some of those folks. But it's really that $1.5 trillion budget number that's really got a lot of folks scared. And so, I mean, I think absolutely when it does get moved out of the House, goes over the Senate side, they're going to change it, and it ultimately it will get refined in conference committee. But I do think, as we've talked through a lot of our folks here in Indiana, and as we reach out to counterparts across the other states, there's bipartisan support there, but it's got some challenges. The other thing that I think is important to note as we think about this Farm Bill, of the current makeup of Congress, there's over 260 members of Congress that have never voted on a Farm Bill before. And so these
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so these are people that have to be educated about the importance, whether it be the nutrition titles or the commodity farm program titles. And so there's a lot of education going on. And so you think about those 260 plus members, then you start going down to their staff members that are ones doing a lot of the legwork and the research for this. And so there's a lot of folks that really aren't aware of the value of that Farm Bill to not only their constituency, but also the country as a whole.
Wow, I had no idea that many members of Congress haven't seen one.
Yeah.
And they're in their careers, they're this early into their cycle of politics. That's amazing.
Yes. And I mean, quite frankly, Senator Braun and Congressman Baird, who are on the Farm Bill committees, they've never voted on one themselves since they've been in D.C.
Huh. Wow. It just seems like doesn't seem like that long ago when we did the last one, right?
Exactly.
It seems like we just had this conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not really, but I mean, it's been recent. It feels like.
Yeah.
So that's Washington, D.C. So let's bring it back to Indiana. So public policy for Indiana. So tell us some of the things that's going on that Indiana Farm Bureau Co-op is leading the charge on.
So actually, just recently, our members came together for their 2023 delegate session. So this is where we had over 250 members from all 92 counties come together and really start talk about policy for 2024. And some of the big big areas of focus were around government transparency. And so one of the challenges, with the lack of local newspapers and local periodicals, how do our members, how do citizens here in the state of Indiana get informed about important projects coming to their communities, whether it be zoning type projects or even tax notices, those type of things, county budgets, state budgets. And so how do we provide some opportunity to enhance the use of digital media to be able to get those notices? A lot of this has been driven out of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation's LEAP project up in Boone County, where they're acquiring, I think, 8,000 acres of property for this mega site. And so there's been a lot of concerns about the lack of transparency that was ushered in with that project. And so we had a lot of conversations.
Explain that a little bit more about what that is.
So this is a large project. Eli Lilly is going to be one of the anchors in that economic development project up there. But the Indiana Economic Development Corp, as well as some other folks, were able to go around and they signed some agreements on some land in hopes that there would be a company come around to ultimately want to buy that land. And so the challenge that we found is, it inflated the prices on ground, and a lot of it was what we would all consider prime farm ground. And so that's got some folks concerned. The other challenge is they've discovered there's not enough water to be able to do some of the things they want there. So they're now having a conversation about shipping approximately 100 million gallons of water a day from the greater Lafayette region down to Boone County to be able to support these projects. And so what we've heard from our members, they want to have a seat at the table. I mean, it's not that they oppose economic development.
What's going on.
Right, just let us be a part of it, because they felt like that in that particular project, the cake was pretty well baked before they understood what was going on. And so whether it be notices or reporting back out to local communities, governments, that we heard a lot about that. And tied right with that is water quantity. I mean, now this notion that we're going to be shipping 100+ million gallons of water out of one community into another, what does that ultimately do from a watershed management perspective? Indiana, as you all know, we've been very blessed. We are we have a lot of water.
We got plenty of water today, right?
But what happens in 20 years? Yeah. I mean, as the environment continues to shift and these rain patterns, these drought patterns continue to shift, I mean, our members are telling us they would rather have the conversation now before we're in a situation like in Arizona or New Mexico where, they're struggling to find water. And so water quantity is going to be a big issue that our members and we'll tackle. Actually, our board of directors approved a water task force. So we'll start to set that up here this fall to really understand what are our resources, what are our opportunities, because quite frankly, since the drought of 2012, we haven't had the water quantity conversation here in Indiana because we've been very blessed with a lot of rain. So that's a big issue. Some of the other things that came up on our members' minds, the Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory and that whole system tied to Purdue and Board of Animal Health. And that's for the volume of livestock we're fortunate to have here in Indiana, we need to make sure we have a robust testing facility here in the state. So, with the high path avian influenza that the poultry industry's dealt with, God forbid we'd ever have African swine fever hit the shores here in the United States, making sure we have robust testing facilities. And those facilities have been woefully underfunded for about 20 years. And so we need to make sure that there's some funding opportunities to get that back up to where it needs to be. Those are probably some of the big issues that our members discussed during the delegate session. The other thing that I do know, the board of directors have established or asked us to establish a tax task force because as we saw, many of our urban suburban friends, they were shell shocked when they got their property tax notices and how much their homesteads went up on property tax. Well, as you well know, the folks that we deal with, farmland property taxes going up percentage-wise about the same. And so maybe it's time to reevaluate how that farmland formula and how that's all put together.
The answer is simple, but no one's got the stomach for the answer because it's just not. Just go to a sales tax, state sales tax, and get it out of the property. But it doesn't seem like no one's got the appetite for that monster.
Well, I mean, I think that's the interesting thing where facts and politics start to come together, and those two.
How's that work?
A lot of times those collide and don't. Yeah.
Don't confuse me with your facts.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to know
That
them.
is in the way of my ideals.
Absolutely. But there's a lot going on. I mean, we continue to have a conversation around farmland preservation, whether it be from the concern around the volume of acres taken up or being covered up with solar projects, or closer to the Indy metro area, the number of warehouses that continue to grow in cornfields. And so what does that mean for our future here in Indiana? And so, there's some tough questions on the horizon that our members have asked us to start to dig into. I think at this point we've got more questions than answers ourselves, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for us in the ag community to step forward and start leading in some of these conversations instead of always being on the backside of it. So we're looking forward to that and see what we can come up with, and always going to be looking for partners to come alongside of us and help share their wisdom, because that's one of the things that we need. We need all of ag pulling together on some of these, because it's. We're continuing shrinking part of the population.
Well, thanks for doing the hard work on this, because the answers aren't easy. I mean, when we talk about like solar panels and things like that, I mean, on one hand, we sure like to think property rights. We think if you want to have a livestock, or if you want to farm, or if you want to do that with your land, you can do that. But then, one thing our listeners, not all of them may know, that once it's out of ag production, it never goes back. It can never go back. And it just seems like if you're going to have a warehouse and solar panels, or smart people should figure out how to put them on top of the warehouses. Maybe, I don't know, but it just seems like we could go up.
Listen to you throwing out ideas.
I don't know.
You're in the deep end of the pool, Sal. That doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. Because it's
Well, but I think, Sal, you make a great point. I mean, that's one of the funding tenets of Indiana Farm Bureau is personal property rights. And that's where we really struggle, is that convergence of personal property rights and then farmland preservation. And we've surveyed our members time and time again, and trying to see if anybody can come up with some magic idea how we can thread that needle. And we've yet to find the silver bullet there. And it's interesting when we do survey our members. I mean,
and
broad support.
46% coming back. You're like, what the heck?
Yeah, we've got broad support, for renewable energy, for solar. But then you ask the question, what about on farmland? And it is staunchly the other direction. And so I think that's an area that we continue to meet with different solar companies and utility companies around the state of Indiana, just to try to not only learn, but educate them. I mean, I think one of the things that we continue to hear in that space is, a lot of what drives those projects is proximity to substations. And, I hear a lot, we've got this, reclaimed coal mine down in southwest Indiana. Well, there's not a whole lot of substations around there. And so that's the kind of the chicken or the egg piece of that is, do we need to invest in additional infrastructure to build out that, that utility substation to be able to then utilize some of this, what we would consider less productive, less desirable ground. But those conversations continue to go on. I think, the other thing we have to be honest, there's a lot of push out of our friends out of Washington, D.C., and there's a lot of money, especially through the infrastructure package and the Inflation Reduction Act, thrown at some of those technologies. And, again, back to that economic development conversation, it's good, but we just got to figure out that balance. And I think that's one of the challenges in a lot of these conversations. What we're hearing from the members, that balance has kind of been thrown out of whack. And sometimes, big government's kind of putting their thumb on one side of the scale and kind of pushing things versus, we're fortunate in Indiana with our way our government system set up with lot of local zoning, we're very supportive of local control and let those systems, those decisions be made at the local level versus dictated out from the state side.
Yeah.
So I didn't cue you up with this at all, but let's shift gears just for a minute and talk about membership. As far as cooperative goes for us, I mean, there's this trend of membership, and they're aging, obviously, and it's how do you generate that interest to get younger people back involved and understand what you do? Are you seeing that same thing for you guys, and how are you dealing with it?
Yes, this is a proverbial conversation we have inside Indiana Farm Bureau because our membership is trending older, and I think one of the challenges that we're starting to see, some of those folks that have been on a county board for decades, quite frankly. I mean, that was their social outlet. And so trying to figure out how we bring the next generation or quite frankly, we're getting to the point where it's two generations behind. How do we get those folks to be engaged with us? And so one of the conversations we have is, historically at Indiana Farm Bureau, if you're a county board member, we're going to ask you for hours and hours of engagement throughout the year. And now we're starting to talk about what is it that we can use that person for 2 hours, 6 hours, just short snippets, because we've got some great young folks all over this state. And how do we get them engaged? But as they're chasing kids and sports and all the other activities that are available to folks today that weren't 20 years ago, how do we get them for what time they're willing to give? And it's okay that they can't be at everything. And so we're looking at different opportunities, whether through our policy advisory groups, and some of those doing different Zoom webinar type opportunities. We do some DC fly-ins and those type of things where we're trying a little bit of everything to just see what starts to stick. But it is absolutely a challenge for us as an organization, as well as other co-op type organizations. Just how do you surface the next group of engaged individuals?
Absolutely. How do you drive that interest and get them involved?
Right.
Yeah.
I think if there's there wasn't much good come out of 2000 and 2001 with the COVID and everything we went through with the pandemic. But one thing that did happen was that it taught us how to use Zoom calls and Teams calls and things like that. And it made us a lot more efficient with how we decide if we're going to drive 5 hours or if we're going to drive 4 hours. I mean, it's always better to be in person, but can it be done more efficiently? And maybe that'll help with some of the participation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Might have to change some bylaws about what's
right.
Right? Yeah. That you can vote remotely, but it is hard to find people to serve on boards and committees.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing, it's interesting, we've had some meetings here this summer that, we want to be in person. And then the day before, hey, is there going to be a virtual link? Cause I don't think I'm going to make it.
I can't make it.
Yeah. And so you're absolutely right, Sal. I think, that ability, it definitely forced us as an organization to embrace technology that it may have taken us a few more years to get there. But we're still struggling how to balance that because as some folks have mentioned, Indiana Farm Bureau, we're a high-touch organization. Again, 92 county farm bureaus, many of them historically had monthly meetings. And so how do you figure, what's that balance? How do you need to meet monthly? Do you need to meet quarterly and some of those type of things? And again, you kind of joke, but yeah, it does take some bylaw changes in some places to be able to allow that to function. But I think it seems to me that there is a growing group of young folks across the state that are wanting to be engaged and just not really sure what organization, where I fit in. So I think I'm pretty optimistic that we'll figure it out. I think many of us we're going to potentially run through some rough times to get there, but I think I'm pretty optimistic. There's some pretty smart young folks out there that can help us figure these things out.
I agree. There's some really impressive young people and the way they think, the ideas they have, and and they have different motivators, I guess, which is not bad to bring to the table either.
Absolutely.
So we sort of get rutted into where we are, and there's some other ideas out there. So.
Yes.
I'm sure I have more questions. I'm not sure what they are. I think I could listen to Andy talk for the rest of the day.
We sort of kind of threw it all on you
Yeah.
to just talk, but do you have anything else you'd like to bring in?
So I
Forefront
think the big thing just to leave folks with, Indiana Farm Bureau. I mean, on the membership side, the incorporated side, we are different than our insurance partners. I mean, a lot of times when you go introduce yourself, I work for Indiana Farm Bureau. Oh, you're with the insurance? No, we are the not-for-profit arm of the organization. But I would highly encourage folks that if you have interest in issues around your communities, reach out to your county farm bureau. You don't have to be somebody that goes to every board meeting, but know that you have folks there in the community willing to help. Whether working years ago during the buildup of the livestock industry here in the state of Indiana, a lot of county farm bureaus help to work with members and young families get through those local zoning processes. Now with the solar renewable conversation, we're here to help. And we may not always have the answers, but between our team of lobbyists at the state house, our federal lobbyists, and we've got a gal that does nothing but handle local issues, we can figure out the right direction to point you. And so I think for that 3250 membership, I think there's a lot of value to be gained there. And so I just really encourage folks that, if you're engaged in agriculture and have some challenges with various different issues, again, we're just like many of you folks are, we're just another organization here willing to help and make sure we promote agriculture and support our rural communities.
That's a good point. The membership is pretty. That's pretty cheap to have somebody as a resource, and like you said, you may not have the answers, but you certainly have the information where you can make an educated decision on your own farm or your own issue, whatever those are, because you guys do have the connections with the state house and the regulators.
Yes.
So for those who are sitting out there that might be wondering, the 3250 membership, any other qualifiers to be a member?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty easy. And I think the other thing, just kind of think about that, Sal, is just, we may not have all the answers, but again, the resources that we can bring to bear, and then the collective resources, because there may be something going on in Pike County that's similar to what's going on up in Noble County, and being able to make those connections. And so folks and members aren't recreating the wheel every time.
That's a good point.
That's a good point. Yep. I don't have anything else,
That's all
Sal.
I got. That's all I got.
That's all you got?
That's all I got.
All right. We certainly appreciate you coming in for sure. I know you're busy.
No,
busy
thank
all
you
the
for
time.
having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Good. Well, we'll have you back, hopefully.
Excellent. Perfect.
So, all right. That's another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Thank you all.
Thanks.